latest film from Leigh Whannell drops in theaters this weekend. In his last movie, he looked at the Invisible Man. This time, he's tackling the Wolf Man. So let's talk about it. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comments section. Let me know, what did you think about Wolfman, and give me that point of reference. Have you seen the original Wolfman? What do you think about Leigh Whannell's previous movies? As for me, I was a big fan of Leigh Whannell's last two movies, and a big part of that is I felt like both of them were just so well crafted with really smart scripts, where it felt like every time I thought I'd figured out where it was going, he was always 2 steps ahead of me, and he'd have another twist. And I went, see, you're smarter than me. You know better than me what you're doing. And I loved that about those movies and just how well put together they were. So naturally, when he's got a new movie coming out in the same ballpark as his previous 2 films, I'm very excited to check it out. So did it deliver? Let's get started talking about the good. And for me, probably the best thing about this film is that it just is a nice, tight survival film. I am a sucker for movies where people are stranded at a specific location and they're desperately trying to survive. And this is one of those movies. Very early on in the film, something happens that kicks everything into motion, and it kind of plays basically like a real-time movie. It's not actually real-time, but it takes place over this single night as they're trying to survive the events and everything kind of going on in these woods with the Wolf Man. And that sort of movie is just very much my kind of thing. Adding to that is just good old-fashioned practical effects in here. So as you're watching it, it's not one that does kind of like a fast wolf transition the way, or transformation, the way that, American Werewolf in London did. This one, it kind of does it throughout most of the runtime of the film. You're slowly watching a transformation. And so every time you see it, you're looking for the little detail that's different, and just all practical makeup, body horror, little nasty little bits. To the nasty little bits, there's plenty of squirm-inducing little moments where you see something and you go, that's nasty. And then they keep messing around with it and you're like, oh. And then one more thing happens and I'm like, ugh. There was a ton of that going on in this movie throughout the film, and some of it is the practical gore, and then some of it was just there's certain ideas that are interesting and fascinating that are nasty that are presented in the movie that kind of get that big reaction out of you. Another thing in here that was a nice little touch is that it does some stuff with the camera and the way that it kind of transitions these shots to change the perspective from being that of this man that is transitioning to whoever he's communicating with. And it'll do these shots where it kind of pans around 2 different people, and the lighting will change and it'll start to expose things differently. And it does things with the audio and the way language is perceived of, that is just a really, I haven't seen a movie do this type of perspective transition to explore kind of what's going on in a character. And so it's just some nice little flourishes like that brought something fresh and new to the table. All that said, I really wasn't feeling this movie, unfortunately. As someone who's very excited, big fan of his previous 2 movies, I left this movie pretty disappointed. So let's move on to the bad. And simply put, I just felt like the movie was very thin. There wasn't a lot to it. And early on in the movie, it feels like it's setting up these big ideas about a son that's afraid of his father, and then that son grows up and he's trying to not repeat the sins of his father, and he's trying to be the better version. And it puts these ideas out there about how fathers should protect their daughters, but then with the nature of the story, it kind of turns that on its head, and the protector becomes the danger. This is just the basic premise. These aren't spoilers for the movie. And puts these ideas out there and introduces ideas about kind of what's going on with the marriage and the dynamic between this husband and the wife. And it seems like it's touching a little bit on the idea of this boy that was raised in this very remote wilderness, very much on the land in a dangerous place, that chooses to move into a very urban setting and, becomes a writer, marries a journalist. And it touches on, like, are we playing around with the idea of how different worlds can be inside of our society? And then the movie doesn't really go anywhere with any of that. It doesn't feel like those are, like, it introduces ideas. You're like, okay, all right. Is that like the metaphor for this film? And is that we're going somewhere with this? And as the movie went along, it became clearer and clearer that we're not really touching on any of that. We're not going anywhere with any of that. We're not exploring any of that. And the characters, as it goes along, you introduce an idea that okay, I see what we're going to explore something here. And it doesn't, which makes the characters very thin. And it feels like you're trying to take a very one-dimensional character and make them seem like they have depth by having this idea of, he doesn't want to be like his father. There's stuff going on with their marriage. But it's just a statement. It doesn't go anywhere. So they are these very simplistic characters. And then likewise, as you go into the story, the thrills of surviving the night, I like the genre, so there's things in that I enjoyed, and I like the gore and the squirming, but it's very straightforward. Something happens, and we're just trying to make it through the night. We're trying to get out of here alive, and that's kind of it. And I talked about before with his previous two movies where I constantly felt like he was smarter than me. And every time I thought I'd figured it out, or I'd got the twist, or where it was headed, he'd have one more thing, and he was always smarter than me. He was always ahead of me. It was so well crafted, where each little detail, or I forgot about something, and he pulls it back in, and ta-da! You get to the end, and it was like, yes, you did it. You outsmarted me, and you delivered the thrills. And I didn't feel that at all with this movie. It just played very straightforward, simple, and basic. But, as I mentioned, even the ideas that were introduced, it doesn't feel like it goes anywhere with them. They don't pay off. There's not like this big arc and journey exploring themes of generational trauma, relational damage, the urban versus rural area. Like, it doesn't go anywhere with any of them. It just says that at the beginning, and then we just go into survival story, and then the credits roll. And so it almost felt like the opposite of his previous movies. It was super well crafted to, like this just felt like it played out. Like, without the craft, without the wit, without outsmarting me, you just had people surviving or not surviving, however it plays out with individual characters. And somewhat even along those lines, when you get into some of the survival parts and what's kind of going on with the creatures and the Wolfman mythology and everything like that, the transition, there are a bunch of times where it didn't feel like our characters were surviving because they were clever enough, they outsmarted the creature, they figured out the weakness, whatever you needed to do to kind of escape the moment. It just felt like they survived or didn't survive because the story needed to happen. So Wolf would behave differently based off of what needed to happen for the specific characters to survive, move on, make it to the next moment. How fast the wolf can run depends on what the scene determines. And it just felt like a little bit, it felt lazier. It didn't feel as well thought through. And just that idea of a well-crafted script. Just everything is thought through. Everything ties in and it's consistent. The rules are established. The characters are the right characters to be in this story to make it compelling for them to survive. That I felt about these last two movies. I just did not feel that here at all. This specific family dynamic trying to survive wasn't interesting. They didn't have a specific skill set that was used in the movie that made them survive, that made it interesting. Like even the characters that might have been interesting to battle the wolf and the creature and everything like that, it doesn't go there with the characters. So it's just people running around and surviving because the rules of the wolf were changed in given moments and scenes so that they could. And when you're making a thriller and a horror movie, what makes a difference between, I like the genre and, that was really good, is does it feel earned? Did you set something up and pay it off? And I just did not feel that with this movie. So when you get to the end and the final resolution and what happens with each of the characters, it was like, I don't really feel anything, because I don't feel that any victories were earned, any tragedies were earned, and it's not paying off a character arc, a journey. I'm not learning anything. Nothing's crescendoing on any level. And that was so disappointing, especially given how fond I was of his previous films. Overall, this was a misfire for me. There is some good body horror. It is a genre that I like. It doesn't overstay its welcome. There's things that do work. But on a story, character, and thematic level, it was just hollow. There was nothing there. And the well-crafted scripts that I felt that he had with his previous 2 movies, that just wasn't present with this movie. I was very disappointed. Overall, it's a C+ on the entertainment scale, a 6 out of 10, and if you're interested, you can probably just wait to stream this movie. This one didn't really work for me. No reason to rush out to go see it in the theater. Hey, thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, I've got more like it. You can check them out somewhere around here. Hey, thank you so much for watching. Keep talking movies and TV too much. Bye-bye.